Sanatan Siddhashram is a center. It would be difficult to put all these English words as a suffix or prefix to it, but it is a Gurukula Vidya Kshetra. Its entire vision is Sanatan Siddhashram Adhyatmika Vishwa Vidya Satra. Old time Bengal would have satras, where you would learn. So these are the learning centers. It is essentially founded on the principles of the Baul tradition, which is I would qualify it by saying it's a yoga bhakti tradition as opposed to a bhakti yoga tradition, because there is a lot of emphasis on the hatha yoga and the yogic aspects as you step into the path of the Baul to embody the spirit of the bhakti, of the Vaishnava parampara. So it is founded by Ma Parvati Baul, a very renowned Baul sadhika, Baul teacher and a guru, who had the adesha of her guru, her Param Guru Sanatan Das Baul. And it is in great proximity with Shri Aurobindo's thoughts, the essence of the Baul aspect. And if you were to look at the spectrum and the universe of ideas that Shri Aurobindo ushers us in, if I were to identify a particular location or give it a GPS location over there, I would identify Baul to be very much in proximity to Chaitya Purusha or psychic being aspect, of Shri Aurobindo. I'm going to take liberty in assuming that most of you are quite familiar with a lot of vocabulary related with Shri Aurobindo's thoughts. But at times, if I do not get that vibe, I will recalibrate and explain myself wherever I can. So that's about the Baul tradition. It's an ancient tradition, age-old, almost 1,000-year-old tradition. It has many, many ancient roots connected intricately with the Bauddha traditions and later came into the Vaishnava fold. Now, coming here for today's topic, specifically, I will have to seek some concessions in advance from you because I'm not a scholar. So if you are expecting the rigor of a scholar and the cohesiveness in my articulation today, please excuse me in advance. Then where do I come from to this podium? What do I want to share? What is the spirit with which I am here? I can say I have been on the path of sadhana. Sadhana is endless. So one can never say that you are the siddha of the sadhana. So in sadhana path, everything that is written, not written, transmitted to you through oral traditions, transmitted to you through great Guru Shishya Paramparas. You sit at the feet of the Gurus, you learn. So what would otherwise become extremely interesting for the scholars to understand the chronology of the knowledge, where it is coming from, how it has originated, what does it entail? For us, that burden is not there. So I really respect, for that the effort the scholars make in order to really unravel all those aspects. But we sit in front of these great ideas, great thoughts, and great verses, even coming from the Baul tradition, which is an oral tradition, where the constitution of the wisdom is in the form of the Baul songs or the Mahajanirpad. All that is disseminated is in the form of the songs. So for Bauls, songs are the Shastras, and Ekatara, the single string instrument, is their Nada, on which the songs are mounted, right? So, and this is disseminated by the Guru to the Sishya, sometimes after long wait. So we do not have a 4-year programs, nor do we have certifications, nor do we know on a day-to-day basis whether we are failing or passing. No idea. I might be passed yesterday and I might be failed today. So no idea on that. So this is the space from which I will be interacting with you. So please bear with me on that. So the whole topic, I think it's so much related with core ideas and essence of Shri Aurobindo's thoughts. Vedic knowledge, integral yoga of transformation. So this is, contextualizing I'm not sure if I'm contextualizing Vedic knowledge in integral yoga of transformation, or I'm not sure I'm going to contextualize integral yoga of transformation and look at how it looks at the Vedic wisdom. So my thoughts on this topic that has been given to me, or I'll be contemplating on, there is a certain trajectory I would like to take. First and foremost, one would inevitably come at the doorstep of secret of the Veda, which Shri Aurobindo has unraveled in a light of newness completely. That you can also look at Vedic hymns and the Vedic knowledge and Vedic essence this way is something that is a blessing that has come to us from Shri Aurobindo. And the meditation that he brings to this secret of Veda is to spend immense amount of time on the vision of Yagna. You know, that is the basis on which Shri Aurobindo expounds secret of Veda. Now, Yagna, for all the practical purposes, is ritual. You know, essentially it's a ritual. So it would be difficult in the Indian context to envisage or envision spiritual without ritual. The very word spiritual is incomplete if you take out the ritual away from it. Now, how do you internalize this ritual? How do you embody it? What is its outer form that is given? Is there a way of a ritual that yogically can be embodied through yoga sadhana, which need not have the same familiar outer form? That is a matter of exploration that our vast Sanatana Dharma principles allow us to be the adventures of consciousness, as we would know Shri Aurobindo to be one of the greatest of the explorers on this terrain. Right? So I also come from the space of learning and being the practitioner of the Tantric Vidyas, where ritual becomes crux and the core in many ways. And more intimately you understand the power of the ritual, what it brings to the sphere of consciousness, how it transforms you, transformation being one of the important words that we are going to discuss today. Shri Aurobindo, however, had paid attention to the fact that the times, how they are changing, and what constituted the requisite ambient environment and ecosystem for the efficacy of the ritual systems is not available with the same level of certitude anymore in the changing technological spaces in the time. As simple as that. There is pervasiveness and invasiveness of technology or the modernity or whatever you might call it, that the liminal spaces that you would require to do your dharana and dhyana and sadhana are completely occupied by this small few inches glowing screens right in front of your eyes, right? So in those liminal settings, in those wonderful ambience, your perception is enhanced and augmented and amplified. Whereas here you have a circumstance which is completely invaded and pervaded and permeated by destructive, or I would say, I won't say destructive, that would be too much to say, especially while using this microphone, using that projector and using a tab, and all of that. But sometimes this romanticism just takes over, so please bear with it and you make the concessions on your side. But having said that, you have this challenge. This is a very present challenge. And this is only the tip of the iceberg, what I have articulated. Shri Aurobindo, being the explorer of the consciousness that he is, he understood the underpinnings of the psychological challenges these changes have brought into the human consciousness. Already affected changes. So our ancient view of, let's say, cascading of life would be that on the helm would be Adhyatmikata, which is the revelatory knowledge that was revealed to our ancient sages and seers over the aeons, from where we could harness religiosity, we could constitute a multifarious, rich fabric of culture, which would then inform our polity and Rajyanga, which would then inform us what would a healthy economic system would look like. This would be the typical, flow. But now what we are witnessing and what we are envisaging, what we are seeing and experiencing is exactly the reversal. If you just were to look at it, it is the so-called power dynamics, geopolitics, economic, who has oil, who has mineral, who has this much. Even though we are not great economists with very sophisticated knowledge on all the GDPs and various other Ps, but we know for sure that this is broadly the dynamics around which our reality is getting shaped. This has now become the fulcrum on which the life is being lived. And from there, there is then that is informing how the polity has to be and the policy making has to be, which further is asking and placing demands on the culture to make necessary adjustments to serve the interests of the polity and the policy, which is on the firmament of the economic material prosperity. And the culture, which is shrinking because of this reason, is asking religion to go more and more into survivalistic mode and elicit responses to the life, not from the space of vastness, but by the sharpness of the survival mode. So which is what is poking us from all sides and all directions. And such a religion is placing immense demands on the scope and the exploratory nature of the Adhyatmic Tattva itself. So there are clear no-go zones being drawn to a spiritual seeker in that sense. So this reversal, what it looks like, a harmless it is not something that has happened by, most of our Western authors nicely put how everything starts from Renaissance, how things have become so calcified, and therefore the emancipation, the thought and the freedom, the conceptualization starts from Renaissance, how that has liberated the scientific invigoration and resulted in great number of innovations, which has brought down great amount of social and wellness to the whole of the society, of which we are partaking those benefits. So this is usually the trajectory, right? I wish it was so beautiful. But it is not that beautiful in its essence, because in order to arrive, you have to juxtapose this wonderful, sophisticated marketing articulation of, putting the modernity or the postmodernity on the pedestal without questioning and putting it for the accountability. Because you have to juxtapose this movement along with this reversal of, from Adhyatmikata, how you became economically materially driven. These two are inseparable movements. You cannot just articulate the Purnima and not talk about Amavasya. Our Sanatana Dharma view will never allow that. As soon as we see a full moon, we know it's only 15 more days for the Amavasya. We are not attached to the luminosity as an eternal truth unless we are exhorted by our Vedic vision, talking about the supernal suns which are not bound by the dusk and the dawn. Right? We have to think about it, and we intuit in our being, in our culture, in our fabric, in our psychology, that way. So this juxtaposition is extremely important, so much so that we have to then investigate and diagnose exactly this reversal of consciousness from the Adhyatmikata basis to the materiality as your central being, means it came at the cost of destroying sacrality and the sacredness. The vision of the sacredness has to be destroyed bit by bit, in order to enable this denigration, which can be positioned euphemistically as an evolution. Right? So this has happened. And what it means is the current day aspirant who wishes to connect back to these liminal spaces of the sacrality, enter into those intuitive spaces where the subjective, objective consciousness meet and inform together with that Shiva Shakti Tattva. Together they dance and creates abundance and a fluorescence of life, is put to tremendous amount of test because of these changes. The whole territoriality has been changed. The topographies have changed. You go to, I was talking to sir in the morning who came from New Mexico, and you would not see the Native Americans finding their sacred spaces anymore. There is no way they can enter into their portals of their own consciousness, which has sustained them within. So this is the cost and this is the price which we have paid. So therefore, Shri Aurobindo recognizes this irreversible damage already. And it is not a big deal to articulate this damage, because for us the meta crisis has been already articulated through the yuga cycles, where dharma keeps depleting. So therefore, don't get too anxious. It is a cyclical manifestation. So therefore, what we have so elaborately articulated about the depletion in the sacrality around us is but part of these cycles, and Shri Aurobindo brings this as a reminder to us in our consciousness, right? So at the turn of the 20th century, therefore, his vision of the Veda becomes extremely tantamountly important. Right now we can talk elaborately, pat our backs with great deal of confidence about the hidden wisdom within the Vedic knowledge, but what was surrounding him at that point in time was almost the infested environment of colonial view, which was hardly romantic, especially for somebody who studied overseas, to come back to India and to unlearn, unpack. And one has to only prostrate a zillion times to him to have had that enormous capacity to let go and not cling to what he has cherished, but even more beautifully later positioning all that what he learnt in the macro philosophical system, that he has given place to Homer, Iliad, as well as Shakespeare on par with a higher consciousness. He is not somebody who suddenly said, oh, Western, so therefore, no, he understood the gravitas of those views and those visions. He is not somebody who is just blindly romantic saying that those truths hold no power or no profundity. He is the one who was the surveyor of the ancient mind so very well, he knew the topographies very well. So this is extremely important to understand through whose eyes we are looking when we are looking at the Vedic vision, when Shri Aurobindo is presenting to us the secret of the Veda, right? So that is my first proposition for you to contemplate on in setting up the base for this. Within the secret of the Veda, he brings forth the metaphors and the understandings of what constitutes Yagna, is the fire, the Agni. Ghrita, you have the clarified ghee or the butter, or say ghee, what we offer. And then you have the abundance given to you in the form of the horses and the cows and the benediction of the Devatas that is bestowed upon you for taking up a Yagna like this. Right? So Yagna becomes so powerful in its vision that Shri Aurobindo then brings these elements of fire, and he says fire is not fire. It is the tapas and the intelligence, the fire of the intelligence. It is the willpower, it is the consecration power, it is the purificatory power, it is all of this and far more in its essence. So how one sits as a Yajamana at the pedestal of the Yagna has to be understood. And what you need to understand this Yagna as not just as the Yagna of the fire ritual. You know, when we say fire ritual, it is so shallow. It just takes away the layers and layers of depth at one go. what one needs to understand Yagna as sacrifice. Then Shri Aurobindo takes this underpinning of the sacrifice of the Yagna. How he catches these underpinnings is extremely important, and it is very consistent across all his interpretations of the ancient texts, by the way. Because now we are standing at the edge of this technological damage or damage of progress that we have done to ourselves. So he has to salvage something for us and provide us a new pedestal on which we can reformulate without losing the essence. So therefore he says, let's catch it. And this is the sacrifice, the element of sacrifice. Then he takes the element of sacrifice and he connects it to the Tyaga Bhava, literally as that how you are going to operate in this world on the principles of Tyaga, not on the principles of Bhoga. And that when you are confronting the titillations and the vicissitudes of the Bhoga on a day-to-day basis, how you need to mount yourself on the pedestal of Tyaga becomes extremely important, counterbalancing aspect. If this is not there, we are off the cliff. But then how would you achieve the power and the strength of the Tyaga without yoga? So, with yoga, you have Tyaga and have the right wisdom to meet the Bhoga. Without yoga, no power of Tyaga, all that you have is unlimited Bhoga leading to Roga. So this is the axis that Shri Aurobindo in his own way has tried to bring into our consciousness and impress upon us the necessity of understanding the spirit on which these wonderful ritual systems, which are so intricate, that they have in them the whole of cosmogony encapsulated and encrypted. The whole attitude of the living is imparted. So if you were a ritual practitioner, it's very easy to experience this. We sit in the presence of the fire and we keep making the offerings and the oblations, and the fire is in front of you. But a point comes inevitably when you have done this as your sacred practice over years and years, that you realize that the fire in front of you is fire within you. It is not there you are offering, but it is here you are offering, and it is being received here. Then there and here and there and here gradually gets collapsed with all the boundaries, and it becomes one. This internal and external, inward and outward, is collapsing. A ritual has a palpable, tangible, experiential reality embedded in it. It's not a speculation. When it is not done with this kind of a spirit, and it is only repeated act of shallowness without the vigor and the vitality, that's when we have turned the word ritual as a denigrating statement, unfortunately. Ritual are kuch to karke niklo. So the problem is not so much in the structure and the architecture of the ritual itself. The problem is in the attitude with which we have approached it over a period of time, that we have lacked the vigor and vitality of it, right? So I'm going to now contextualize Shri Aurobindo's idea of Yagna itself, but where do we locate Yagna in the Vedic vision? So one of the most gold standard suktams that we go to Vedas is Purusha Suktam. And I also love the fact that how much trouble it keeps creating in our society. And I really love when the spiritual wisdom doesn't, it's boring if the spiritual wisdom doesn't do that. You understand? If it doesn't prod you to, think, in a contradictory terms, then you are not the people of active force of intelligence to reconciliate. We are like, I just need a template in which I want to live. So Purusha Suktam is a fantastic. It comes from Rig Veda. It also appears in Samhitas, as well as in, I think, Yajurveda, probably. So this is there. So I would like to quickly go through flow of this in order to contextualize and correlate and juxtapose it with Shri Aurobindo's thoughts. And since I am not a Vedic scholar, so you have to excuse me if my intonations are off, but I will just go through the translations and contextualize. Can you just scroll down? Yeah. So this is Om Sahasra Sirsha Purusha Sahasraksha Sahasrapad Sabhumim Vishvato Vritva Atyadishta Dashangulam. That's so beautiful, that last word, no, Atyadishta Dashangulam. There the trick is there in the whole of thing. What it says, he, the cosmic Lord, the Purusha with 1,000 heads and 1,000 eyes, 1,000 legs, is the one pervading all the universe. After saying he is that, he is pervading all, and then leaves a little bit. Still extends 10 inches beyond. That 10 inches is not our 10 inches. That 10 inches is eternity in terms of the time. That 10 inches is infinitude in terms of the space. So do you see the prodding of the Veda? Yes, it's complete, but still there is something little more. This Shri Aurobindo loves a lot. He caught this geniusly, in a way that very few have done it. And then you would have Purusha Veda Sarvam Yadbhutam Yaccha Bhavyam Utatrumasvasheshanaha Yadannena Tirohati. Whatever is born now, whatever is yet to be born in future, all are he alone. Not only this, even for the gods, he is the controller, and hence he transcends the mortal state. This might not be the most prolific of the translations. Aaj ke liye kaam ho jayega. So I really wanted to take this. And so there is that additional push beyond that, leaving it, all of this, still a little more. Right? So what we are talking about, Purusha Suktam is giving to us, is a beautiful quintessential contemplation on the manifest and unmanifest. This we have to pay. So Atyadishta Dashangulam. And then all this and transcends more, mortal state. This is unmanifest aspect of the reality that is being envisioned. Right? So Etavanasya mahima ato jaya gascha purushaha padosya vishva bhutani tripadasya mritam divi. This much is his glory only. All of this is his glory only. We are talking about the Veda Purusha. We are talking about the Purusha conceptualized as the sole reality, essentially. This is our cosmogony, this is everything, Cosmogony to abhi aaya hi nahi hai. Now cosmogony is coming out of it. This much is his glory only, and Purusha is much more than all these. The entire universe of happenings is Vishwa. The entire universe of happenings, Vishwa, and creatures, Bhutani, constitute but only a quarter. Only a quarter, right? Pada of him. The remaining 3/4 Tripada of his glory consists of the immutable consciousness. What is being established to us right now, who we, after reciting many, many hymns and memorizing many, many things, are always too much filled with certitude of everything, right? So for us, it is just bringing us a little down, come to the earth level, says that it's only 1/4. There is so much more which is unmanifest. That leaves, that is in the form of the immutable consciousness. Immutability doesn't mean a non-participative consciousness which is sitting all by itself happily anywhere. It can even play the Leela of Sri Krishna by introducing a little bit new something into your space. Then you are suddenly catching with new permutations and combinations which all your Shastras might not have to explain right now. Unless you are survived, you are going to put yourself as a humble receiver of the revelatory knowledge, you will be happy with your false altitudes. All our current altitudes, at some point or the other, in the process of this play of immutable Purusha, can get diminished of their heights and confidence. We should always remember this. Right? Thoda, next please, if you can go to. So Tripada Urdhva, Udait Purusha Pado se bhavat punah tato swan vyakramata shasanana saneyabhi. So 3/4 of Purusha extends beyond the universe of change. So that is been change and changelessness has been mentioned. The 1/4 of him again and again comes into the play. So what we are so sure about, this is how it has to be, this is what needs to be done, this cannot be done, this should not be changed, that not. Please understand all of these are subject to the laws or the principles at the mutability. The immutable infinite can always introduce new play into the picture. So every time this is gone and it is coming afresh, it can bring in the new potentialities as the possibilities to play out. This has to be held in our. So I am emphasizing this aspect is extremely important. Especially how Shri Aurobindo leverages this aspect from the Veda. Because what you need to know, I always like to mention this to you, everyone. We need to understand that the path that Shri Aurobindo walked is not very different from life he lived. His life is his path. Somebody who has been 24/7 in this consciousness, you cannot differentiate. And somebody who is an exuberant, revolutionary freedom fighter, loving freedom, every ounce and permeated bone of his being and the pore of his being, he is being kept in the isolation. He's been kept in the isolation. So Shri Aurobindo would always not submit himself to containment. Shri Aurobindo then, now, in the future, will never be ever subjected to containment. It's impossible. Keep trying. Very happy. Many people would want to latch onto him from this side and that side. But he says, no, I am here for you. He also plays with you. Yes, you like this particular ideology, take it. And then gradually he pushes you to come to the altitudes where he is. So don't ever reach out to a seer and a rishi in order to fit into your frameworks. Always remember to be at his feet, out of his benevolence, if he is bestowing something upon you as a wisdom, have the ability to receive and take. This is extremely important, right? So this is, can you just go to the next? Yat purushena havisha devaha Yagna tanvata vasanto vasyasi dajyam grishma idmas sharadavihi. So when the gods invoked Purusha, they considered him as their very oblation. The spring season became the ghee, and the fuel became the summer, and the rainy season became the grains needed for the offering of the havi. Now this is extremely important. What you need to know is that before you are doing the act of hava or the homa or the yagna, you are not doing it as of your own genius creation, which we always think this is nothing but the human conceptualization about the Godheads, and it is the formulation of the humans. No. This is where the whole aspect of the Apaurusheya is just misinterpreted for the sake of it. How there can be nobody out there? Apaurusheya, what do you mean by that? Now, what this entails is that humans, what they are doing is but the act of imitation and repetition of what gods have already done. So we learnt our yagnas from the gods. And how can you learn from the gods unless you have a revelatory knowledge? The aspect of Apaurusheya Tattva is being associated with the knowledge being a revelatory knowledge. And this should not be mistaken to be, which is the author who wrote. It is just some set of humans came together and conglomerated. Not on this random, it's not a random business here. Vedic wisdom has a very clear architectural thought which looks and appears like human agency has intervened, but without the revelatory aspect, it would never constitute such plasticity and flexibility in order for you to navigate the consciousness, right? So this becomes extremely important, that we but repeat the act of the gods again and again here in this plane. So that is, for this yagna, they appointed 7 Vedis, and they created 21 kinds of fuel. The very Lord whom Devas desired to invoke their yagna, that very Prajapati was tied to the sacrificial post as the animal offering. Here also again big debates come. I will just not, for the paucity of time, we will not get into all those contemplations, but it's essential to understand that a yagna or a homa or a fire ritual, even that which is done in the tantric mode, is never complete till you make offerings of sacrifice to those elements in the cosmogony which do not partake the oblations through the fire. Not everybody eats. Ants eat probably something from the soil. They do not eat the food like the way we place it on the plate and eat it. The different bhutani, various bhutas, various beings, various sentient beings have their approach of partaking the essence of the nature and prakriti. So this has to be extremely important to understand. So a Vedic yagna never was full unless you have a sacrificial element to it. How Shri Aurobindo holds this aspect as a spirit of the sacrifice and tyaga, and how he embodies and integrates into integral yoga is a beautiful story for maybe some other time. And this is an extremely important aspect to understand. Next is, just hold on. The firstborn Purusha was offered as an oblation to the sacred fire. Now, the Purusha himself, the Veda Purusha himself is being offered. The nature of the sacrifice of your karma yoga, of your whatever the form of the yoga that you are taking place, when that is not complete without the element of sacrifice, who should be offered as a sacrifice? You, who is taking the sense of agency from the Purusha. So this intimacy aspect Shri Aurobindo brings and builds very cohesively. Therefore, in his framework of integral yoga, he very clearly departs from some of the traditional practices, still ensures that the person who has faith in his vision and who walks the path of the integral yoga would still receive the same benefit as would be the wisdom of the tradition. And it is also can be thought as more amenable to the changing circumstances which we were talking about. That why there is a need for evolution of a new way of practicing the yoga in the changing times. And just to remind you, I come from a very, very traditional space. I do my practices. I do my 3 sandhyas and more sandhyas if needed in terms of as per the sampradaya. If I have to go for the sacred gathering, I'll go for that as part of my sampradaya. And so what I tell people is that no matter from which sphere you are, pilgrimage to Shri Aurobindo is a must. So he is like, in a way, in his own way, he is like the Kashi, where all branches have to be opened. Be it the Jainas, Bauddha, or Vedic, or Tantra, or anything. He has such an accommodation. What I intend to say is that his accommodative power is so vast. Where will you put a line of completion and boundary to the sky? Right? So that is Shri Aurobindo, who is the Himalayan peak. So the last verse, I think, last slide. Yeah. So from the Sarvahuta sacrifice was gained, the curd and ghee were created insects born of air. So here now we are coming into the hierarchy that how the sacrifice is essential, how it establishes there is always more of immutability that can introduce play into the mutability, and how the aspect of the yagna is a replication from the devatas to the humans. Now we are talking about the elemental aspects of the sarvahuti, and you have the creation of where the created insects born of air, and all of these aspects come, but most importantly the aspect that comes is that of this verse. Tasmat ajayate sarvahutaha richas samagni jagnire tasmat chandagi jagnire tasmat ajatasvat ajayataha. This from the Sarvahuta sacrifice, the sacred declarations, Riks, Sama, Samas were born. From it again were born the meters Chandas. From these alone came the mantras of the Tajurvedas or the Yaju. Now what it is important is that the manifestation as a sound is being introduced in this idea. The mantras are coming. Chandas is coming. And Sama is what we call in our aesthetics also Samaja Varagamana. Means you walk like an elephant beautifully. That is the intonations of the Vedas. Gana naam tva ganapati kumbhavamahe kavim kavinam upamashravasthavam. This is like this rhythmic intonatory movement of the Vedas is compared with the Sama. That is why the Sama becomes, even the Sama Veda, it becomes even more purified and reified and even more refined in it. So that beauty comes, that sound comes, the mantra comes, the samhita comes, and then you get even the chandas. Chandas is so beautiful that once you learn it, you can never fall out of it. All of this comes as part of the Yagna. And Shri Aurobindo would bring all of that into Savitri. Shri Aurobindo would bring all of this. And it is not only Shri Aurobindo bringing this, the essence of the nature of the chandas, meter and all of that is what constitutes poetry, no? Essentially. So I am one bad poet who has been writing without chandas for a long time just because it is what is called free verse. But we know it inherently that what the power of the meter brings to the table, right? And from the sacrifice Yagna comes the horses and all creatures of the 2 rows of teeth. So this is something that Shri Aurobindo extends elaborately in Secret of the Veda, what the power of the horse as the willpower, the conscious willpower, that what it constitutes, and how it is integral aspect of the Yagna. I think the last page is there, right? After this. So when the gods meditated upon the Virat Purusha, in what ways did they conceive him to be? So you would see from the Veda Purusha, you have the conceptualization of the Virat Purusha as the manifested Purusha. What came out of his face divine, what came out of his 2 hands, and what came out of his thighs, and this is being described. And here comes our most favorite, verse that everybody is ready all the time fighting with, oh, why this hierarchy and all of that. But what I tell is this is one of the most beautiful verses which reminds all sides at all the time. This is a compass, right? What it says is, Brahmanosya mukamasid bahu rajanya kritaha uru tadasya yadvaishya padhya visudro ayayatha. So, from the face of the Virata Purusha were the Brahmins, so to say, these 4 functionalities, which are the thinkers, and then you have the doers, and you have the organizers or the authority which is needed, right? And then you have the, the ones who are the doers and the workers who are holding it. What is important to know, all of them together form the Purusha. Take one out, you have amputated Purusha. All of them have to operate with their optimal functionality. Else you have imbalance in the functioning of the system. So necessarily demeaning any one of them, disrespecting any one of them, how can you do that without disrespecting the Purusha? Please tell me the logic. Can you only disrespect leg or hand and think that mouth and the head and the heart doesn't feel anything bad? So this is a vision of the Veda that is being given to us, that while you constitute the functionality of your, I'll just finish it in 2 minutes. While you constitute the functionality of your societies, please remember the ideal of this is the oneness of the being, not the dysfunctionality. And this has to be born every time. Lastly, because of the paucity of the time, my proposition to this is that why this happens all the time is this is a Vedic revelatory knowledge. If I were to just suddenly introduce a little bit of tantric framework into this, it comes from the revelatory aspect of, let's say, Agna Chakra. Agna is the revelatory aspect. Here there is no ego, it's more of revelation. The knowledge that comes from here forth is not a knowledge that can be attained by your intellectual strife. The doors and the locks have to be opened from the other side. And it has to be given to you. So this is a knowledge that is coming. But in order to actualize it, most often you will any which ways end up. It's an aspiration to actualize it. This is what we as humans have been trying to do all the time. And there can be flaws. There can be some great success. There can be a phenomenal, days of magnificence that they were there. But there can also be the human flaws that we have continued with. There can be a problem in terms of its transcribing in its reality and actuality, which has led to furthermore challenges. If you do not accept this, so it is in Ayurveda, they tell that in one particular indication is coming anywhere, don't ignore it. Because it is like that play where you push it here, it will come from there, you push it there, it will come from there. So it becomes extremely pertinent for everybody who is concerned with the social cohesiveness, which is at the Swadhisthana, to understand how to transcribe the Yagna knowledge on a periodically regular basis to have its vitality for the greater well-being and the Sangraha. Otherwise, the crevices and the cracks that form here lead you directly vulnerable to the forces of the Mooladhara, coming and gripping you and haunting you, not individually, as a collective society also. Right? So this is something that I have presented here, and for my thoughts of juxtaposing Shri Aurobindo's views and looking at his way of looking at this and drawing more from the Vedas, and how he presents in the frameworks, and Shri Aurobindo gives this again and again in the integral yoga. It's not simple that now the word transformation, I will just simply close it by stating that transformation is not, oh, we were like this, we transformed and we became like this. No, it's not as simple as that. You as the lower adhara, who is working from this sphere, because Shri Aurobindo says majority of our humanity is in the vital state, you know. So from here, you need to learn how to receive the higher. Usually higher, by the time it comes to the lower, gets corrupted because of the biases that are there. So how do you expand yourself to really receive? The patrata, how you develop, is what Shri Aurobindo is urging. This requires and entails necessarily not some adjustments and aspiration only, but an entire transformation. He's demanding a lower prakriti transformation, Shri Aurobindo. For that, he uses many, many processes forming together transformation. Transformation is not in isolation. He says aspiration, he says conversion, all of these psychological terms he uses. He uses many other terms together as processes, as if like the levers, they work together to affect the transformation process. Right? For the paucity of the time, I have not extended my thoughts into the process of transformation, which is in itself a beautiful praise. So this transformation is essentially exhorted by Shri Aurobindo to receive and actualize the Vedic wisdom as we proceed further. Jai Guru.